Hello all, thank you for coming. Can you hear me? Well, I hope so. So then, now I know I'm the last of this day on May, and you may feel tired, but you can consider me the crown of the day, the corona, not virus, I hope. So let me kick off by paraphrasing a common saying. For the gift of life, thank your parents. For the gift of knowing how to live life and live this life well, thank your parents and your teachers. I would go even further. Thank all teachers. Now I was lucky because both my parents were teachers, and both my teachers were my parents. My parents actually taught me directly, and I do thank them. Now teachers, and who readily comes to mind as a super duper teacher? Anyone? Well, yes, it is John Keating, isn't it? And why do you consider him a super duper teacher? Any answers, anyone? Yes, 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 yes. Oh, yes. But let me go even further. All right. Uh, he comes to mind as a super duper teacher because of his dedication, his enthusiasm, and his unorthodox methods. At that time, they were unorthodox, to name just a few. Now, I said unorthodox and unconventional. Now, Keating questions authority, reminding his students that one must assess all the consequences of so doing. And I guess you all remember the film, don't you? Now, I've been talking for some time now, and have I mentioned examiners, half the topic of this talk? Oh yes, once, a few moments ago when I said assess consequences. Examiners assess, teachers teach. But what do the examiners assess in our case? The language, English namely, that we teachers have taught our students, and in turn, they have assimilated, hopefully. And we have taught them to speak, write, read, and understand, and listen and understand English. And have we ever thanked an examiner? Have you ever thanked an examiner? Have you? Why not? Ah, yes, a teacher, yes. At the end of the exam. Why? Why, Tavia? Why, Tanya, sorry? Why have you thanked an examiner at the end of the exam? Well, I guess, ah, you're right. But was it you? Was it them that they gave you the chance? Well, let's consider it a bit more. You thanked the examiner because, yes, you passed the exam, but why did you really pass the exam? And have we thanked our teachers for passing the exam? The question is, well, no, the question is not to be or not to be, though we might come to this later, but to teach or to examine, to teach towards exams or merely to teach. And at last, me, wholeheartedly, go for to teach and enjoy it. Now, because if we teach, really teach, the learners will learn, and the examiners, if and when their time comes to assess, will be satisfied with the assessment of the learners we have taught, and the candidates, that is. And they, the candidates, in turn, will be happy to reach the fruit they have toiled for, the certificate, the paper, the charti, I'm sorry for the Greek, the recognition. But before that, what will we have tasted, and what will they have tasted? The real fruit, the knowledge, the fruit of knowledge, and the thirst for more knowledge in English, and only. Now, if as teachers we have instilled this knowledge and thirst for more, our learners will be able to pass any exam, and most importantly, the great exam of what's the great exam? Ah, yes, thank you, Maria. Oh, yes, that's right, it is charti in Romanian, isn't it? So yes, the great exam of life. Life is the greatest exam of all. If we pass it, then we are successful people. If we are not, well, I'm not so sure what we are. So, all right, otherwise, if we teach them to pass English exams, they may, though just barely, pass the exams, but we will have failed them in the real exam. And we ourselves have failed. Now, why do we feel that passing in an exam is failure? Why have we moved our students to the fact or to the idea that passing an exam is success and not passing it is failure? Oh yes, Joanna, raising children is also the great exam. Well, the question is, why do we feel that not passing an exam is failure? Because of parents' demands, Calliope, you're right. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Evdokia. Oscar Wilde did say that. The pressure of the parents, I agree. But remember, who really examines our students and the candidates and people who have learned English? Eventually, who examines them? Yes, they may have to take an exam, to take it again. The teacher, does the teacher examine? Should we see ourselves in the classroom as examiners? And in what way can we see ourselves as examiners? Angelina, would you elaborate on that, please? Aha. Thank you, Yanis. Yes, when we assess them, but how often do we assess them? Do we assess them on one particular day? The end of year exam, perhaps? Or with placement tests? Or with progress tests? Or with final unit tests? Or what? 2-3 times a year, all the time, indeed, we assess them all the time. But do we assess them directly or indirectly? Yes, all the way, indirectly indeed. And how do we do it indirectly? In every lesson indeed, Zoe. Aha. Still, are we examiners? Yes. Are we examiners? Yes, informative assessment, positive assessment, assessment that will help them do even better later. However, do we actually examine them? Well, as far as I know, examination is on one day in a year. The written examination and perhaps the spoken exam, the examination in speaking, is on another year. Are we really both? Do we see ourselves as examiners? Perhaps we do wear an examiner hat every now and then when we work as examiners, and many of us actually are examiners. Uh-huh. Yes, George. I believe that's what we should be, facilitators. Uh, we pave the way for them to learn English and eventually pass exams. But that's not the real thing. Can you imagine? I guess you have known many students who have passed exams, but yes, all right, there are many exams. I won't say some are more difficult, some are easier, but well, they pass exams, but can they speak English? Can they really read English? Can they really listen to English, understand it? And do they enjoy English? Ah, we may be certified examiners, Emma. Mm-hmm. Um, can I ask you something? When you have finished you with your students, I won't say finished because you actually never finish. Well, nobody enjoys to be tested, Joanna. Uh, uh-huh. Look, it depends on what. Hmm. Yes, Aisha, they, well, one of the reasons why they exist is all right. At the beginning, look, well, the question is, uh, do we prepare our students for exams or do we teach our students and eventually teach them some, well, quite a few exam techniques. And then because they have the language and they have all the links, all the skills, well, yes, look, I always raise so many questions. Now, at this point, I would like you to show you someone who is actually speaking at the time, and that would be another great teacher, and I won't say it's just a teacher. He's also an examiner. He's much more than that. I guess you know him, Mr. Luke Prodromi himself. Now, why is Luke mostly a teacher? And he's a great teacher. He's a teacher trainer. He's practically everything. Oh, yes. Did John Keating use humor? Did John Keating connect material to real life? Was John Keating an artist? Well, not by profession. Did he inspire students? John Keating? Does Luke do all that? Does he inspire teachers as well when they go to him as students? Oh yes, making learning material relatable to students' life. But uh, is a student's life when it relates to the learning material uh, leading the student, leading the learner to actually become a fully skilled speaker, reader, and uh, everything when it comes to English, and then pass exams, because that's what I'm getting at. Dimitris, well, yes, we can discuss if Luke will go there. Oh yes, he's creative with teaching. He's unorthodox. Um, exactly. Change in behavior is visibly seen in students not only gaining marks. We know they can communicate because communicating is the real crux of language. And communicating with people mostly, and then eventually also reading and writing. Well, when we write, we communicate. Aha. You mean, and you're talking about John Keating, right? Or are you talking about Luke? Oh yes, the idea is that we don't follow a teacher-centered approach. No, Sultana, I believe, Svetlana, sorry. Um, I don't think marks are subjective. But when it comes to formal exams, they're not subjective, they are objective. Uh, to an extent, again, Aisha, they do assess real. How do we come do we come not examiners? Well, Calliope, that's a good question. I would say focus on our teaching. Yes, we will teach them as well, or we will show them some exam techniques, but we won't examine them. That's not our job. We'll tell them what the examiners do because we know what the examiners do, and we know what the examiners expect. But that's when it comes to going near exams. Until then, yes, teach and enjoy teaching so that they also enjoy learning. And when it comes to exams, they'll enjoy the exams as well. They'll even learn from the exams. Speaking of Luke, yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought I saw a question. Speaking of Luke, I would like to remind you all of something that he wrote. That was quite some time ago. And by the way, it was him that inspired my presentation today. And he's also been an inspiration in my own life. And he wrote quite some time ago, among many great other works, um, a poem by Cavafy, which he changed. The poem is called Waiting for the Barbarians. And he changed it to Waiting for the Examiners. Do we really need the examiners? Yes, all right, I guess students use them, need them. We also need them, well, so to say. And remember that since we mentioned Cavafy, he was yet another teacher, though he was only unknowingly one. All right? And I would like to thank you. Look, sorry, I see something in the chat. It's been going on. There are some questions, right? For the yes, we want to teach them real English. We are forced at times to prepare for examination, especially when it comes to proficiency exams or B2, whatever exams. And we are pressed before they finish high school, indeed. But when it comes to the real exams, and I guess you all know that, if we prepare them generally, if they know how to really communicate in English, how to speak, listen, write, and read English, then what's our worry? What we would do without exams? That's a good question. Look, yes, they do give many raison d'être, but yes, indeed, and I'm quoting you, now what are we going to do without the examiners? These people were a certain solution. They were they save the day eventually. So true, uh, we do need exams, but should we become examiners ourselves just because we need exams? Oh yes, it is an official qualification. However, does it actually prove, for the knee, yes, that they do speak, read, etc.? Drones. Yeah, that would be interesting, Corina. Well, it's the teachers, many teachers, raison d'être, George. Mm. Oh, they don't want to learn English. They just need proficiency. Fine, true. But if we can convince them not by just speaking to them, but by being there for them and by showing them that the real thing is knowledge and the thirst for knowledge. Because if they think that they have finished with English when they've acquired the proficiency certificate or any certificate, then, well, no, they haven't finished with English. We never finish with English. You know, we never finish with learning, do we? Any more questions, anyone? Because this is question time. Um, it's teachers to teachers today. Um, well, learning is life because we learn all the time. Exams are tricky, indeed, Lisa. But does that mean that we can live without them? To an extent, yes. Yes, look, we have to learn to work through all the things in life that we don't like. Quite agree there. The examinator, indeed. Well, sounds like a Terminator, George, doesn't it? Creatively, indeed, with all those realities. Yes, we can be creative and still remember the consequences that we talked about earlier, the consequences that we have to assess before we become an Orthodox. Yes, these are the realities, the consequences. If you don't pass the exam, you don't get a job in the market, etc., etc., etc. And how do we motivate, Nicoletta? How do we motivate? Exactly. I'll give an example. What do you discuss with your students? The boring exam questions? How about discussing drones or, I don't know, the possibility of robots ever taking over, or whether robots should be more logical and why they choose the logical thing to do? Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Yanis, right? The Greek reality. Yes, indeed. Uh, the question is, if we teach, I'm sorry for the need, right? Uh, if we teach, then yes, we have succeeded. Parents, well, talk to them. Explain to them that if they actually learn English and speak English and communicate in English, finally, yes, they will be convinced. Exactly. Some students won't care to talk about, say, artificial intelligence or whatever. Yes, inspire them. That's the key. Oh yes, some parents do. Many parents do actually. Yes, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet. Since we're talking about Hamlet, there is a couple, almost one more question. Yes, motivation starts at home, but remember, we are their second home. The school is their second home. Parents, well, do they know our job better than us? Well, we have to convince them. And we're good with words. I think we can convince them. And of course, yes, if we work with the parents, oh yes, they're great. Yes, we cannot forget we're teachers. We are mostly, um, at heart, we are teachers. That's what we should be. The owners, well, the owners are quite often teachers. And so if they're teachers, yes, they will be convinced and they can also convince the parents. Thank you, Nicoletta. Thank you. Exactly. Take the time to share our views with the parents. Yes, lead the way to making learning enjoyable. Yes, we all have to. At some point, we always have to. But exactly, it should all be relatable to examples, stories, everything. Hmm. Yeah. Well, nobody's cup of tea, actually. Yes, but we sometimes have to. Hmm. Oh yes, people do make their living from exams, and so do I to an extent. And we need to show ways of doing it memorable. Yes, indeed, look. The Greek school, well, that's a long story, and I guess all schools are, ever, yes. Well, perhaps we can somehow be examples for other teachers, the teachers at the Greek school, so they actually enjoy the lessons as well and um, really help their students pass exams. Because all they do, they learn, they teach them all those standard expressions and be done with it. Um, Sorry, I can't see the question and answers. Dyslexia. Well, I'm not an examiner, Yula. Well, I am, but there are special considerations, and the exam boards do give us ideas of how to deal with those special considerations. Hmm. Role models, indeed, Fotini. Am I happy with most public exams? Well, um, that's a long story of how they can be improved. Yes, they can be made to be more relatable to real life. Okay. Evdokia, yes, that's a really rhetorical question, but uh, too many considerations. Now, my time is running over, so let's finish it to an extent. Remember the question. Some people believe the question is to be or not to be. My views on exams, long story. Vaishali, long story. Okay. Well, no, they are not the best possible, my views on exams. And exams are not the best possible, the best they could be. So back to the question. Um, is the question to be or not to be? Well, let me help you there. Hamlet has been eating and drinking long before he asks the question. So what's the real question, is it? What's the question? Remember, he has been drinking. Quite a lot. Aha. Well, yes, I like that, Corina. George, how would you feel after drinking for a few hours? Because it was a 3-hour play. I was suggesting something dirtier. I remember after 3 hours of drinking, I would be wanting to go to the toilet. So the question could have been, might have been, oh yes. The question of the actor oh yes, it's to pee or not to pee. Go to the toilet, live the stage, and be happy. Could have been, might have been, perhaps should have been. Thank you very much. Seize the day. Thank you, teachers.